Hello, dear friend. Here we are. Kardec Radio at 11 p.m. Live, nourishing all of our souls. And we're studying the book Evolution into Worlds, authored by André Luiz, through the mediums Chico Xavier and Valdo Vieira. The book was psychographed in 1958 in two different cities. Even chapters were psychographed by Chico Xavier. Odd chapters were psychographed by Valdo Vieira. Chico Xavier used to be in Pedro Leopoldo, while Valdo Vieira was in Uberaba. In 6 months, they brought us this masterpiece. True mediumship, a phenomenon, and you're welcome to join us. We have studied the preface, which talks about the purpose of this book, which is, as Emmanuel says, to remind us that we are immortal. We are more than the body can tell. So we're not afraid of aging. We're not afraid of we're training ourselves to not be afraid of anything. No, yes. That's the goal. To coach ourselves to understand that life is much more than the eyes can see. And as André Luiz says in his own preface, we're here to study our multi-millenary pilgrimage. What is 40, 60, 50, 80, 90, 100 years compared to millions of years we have lived? Nothing. It's just like a blink of an eye, exactly, but a precious one. And he reminds us that as we study this, we're gonna ignite the fire of our hope, knowing that we are always progressing. So he's saying, if you feel defeated by anything, remember, this shall pass, this shall pass, this too shall pass. So André Luiz is inviting us to renewed hopes in our ascensional march towards God. And we are going to invite you, dear friends, to join us in a prayer. Okay? In a prayer. Thank you, Teresa Castro. Yes, yes, I believe so. We all feel the same humbleness and gratitude for the sacredness of life. So true. So true. It's been 60 years that this book is psychographed, and this book was first translated in 2011 by our group here in Virginia, together with the group in Baltimore. We did the whole course in 2011 and 2012, and now we're repeating now live at Kardec Radio. What a joy! So, to begin, let us begin, especially because the topic today is very intense, spiritual vampirism. Let us say a prayer, asking the good spirits to please protect and guide us. Dear Lord of Life, we want to study more, but to feel more. To feel about you, about our relationship with you, about our co-creation with you. Please forgive us for not knowing better and not knowing how to go by in different ways. But thank you for the infinite ways you use to educate us and encourage us to march forward. We rejoice in the certainty that we're progressing always, and we rejoice in the beauty of life, being part of it, and knowing more about you inside of us and outside of us, since we're all interconnected. Thank you for your loving care. Please protect us, guide us during this session so we can free ourselves of our own limitations and ignorance and be a better helping hand in your universe. With your permission, we begin our study session. tonight. And so be it. Mamma mia, this chapter is spiritual vampirism. It's a daring chapter, I would say. Yesterday we were studying chapter 14 of part 1, which was about spiritual symbiosis. And we learned that in nature, like in nature in different kingdoms, and we are part of nature too, spiritual symbiosis exists. And depending on how this symbiosis goes by, it may turn ugly. It may turn into unhealthy and even lethal conditions. And that's what we call spiritual vampirism. Luiz dedicates one specific chapter to it. And we ask why. Because it's a reality, and we need to know how to identify and change the course of events. You may identify features in your life or in the life of loved ones or in the life of others, and you bet measures need to be taken to change the course of events. So let us study this and see what spiritual vampirism is all about. I'm going to use slides, and this time the slides are not too illustrated. Why? Because the topic is not very uplifting in a way. So we don't want to keep the images in our minds. We want to feel and understand it therapeutically. So I have a few images, but not too many, because Mentor Joseph says we need to focus on the good of it. So we don't need to reinforce the bad of it. Sometimes it's hard to talk about topics of this because we're talking about pathology of the mind, okay? Unhealthiness of the mind, but it's existent. So slides come in, and here we go. Spiritual Vampirism, chapter 15. Luiz tells us that parasitism happens in inferior kingdoms. He says, when we mention the occurrence of obsessions and vampirism in the physio-psychosomatic vehicle, it is important to acknowledge the phenomenon of parasitism in the inferior kingdoms of nature. Remember, when he's talking about physio-psychosomatic vehicle, he's talking about the perispirit. Okay? Okay? Nothing's going to happen in the physical without happening first in the mind and then in the perispirit. So he's talking about obsessions and the true case of subjugation that we call vampirism. But let us stop for a second and ask science, what is parasitism? Parasitism is a relationship. Observe this. It's a relationship between two species of plants or animals in which one benefits at the expense of the other, sometimes without killing it. Oh, wow. There are types of parasitism, the ectoparasite and the endoparasite. According to their action on the host, parasites can be classified as either ectoparasite when their actions are limited to the surface, or endoparasite when they lodge within the body. So to give an example of an endo meaning inside. The parasite, it's the tapeworm that lives in the intestines, okay? And the ectoparasite, like this lime nail galls, as you can see here on a plant, okay? So the reddish ones, they live on the surface, not inside. So there are two different types. But observe this, a relationship that continues benefiting one at the expense of the other without killing it. Okay? So let's go back here. When Luiz explains to us that there is a level of adaptation. He says, we should not forget, though, that every long-term exploratory symbiosis, which is another term for parasitism, especially those that occur internally, result from the progressive adaptation between host and parasite, which by mutual effect slowly becomes accustomed to their society, and the host, unaware of the risks and losses involved. They may compromise not only the existence of the host, but also the very species of the host. So we are paying attention here that Andre Luiz is talking about the adaptation. So let's let's pause for a second and feel the scriptures, because you may be asking, I don't leave this. Remember, I'm going back here, some of the slides. Okay, so we go back to the definition here before we go to the next topic that Andre Luiz uses. When he says it's a relationship, first of all, okay, and then one is benefiting more than the other, and he doesn't kill the other because he needs the other one. So it's a relationship. And as Andre Luiz explains later on in the adaptation, if we stay too long, transformations are going to happen. Yes, there is adaptation, and often the host is not aware of the losses and the risks at the end of the day. Toxic relationships we're talking about? Yes. And they happen in nature. Okay? They happen in nature. If you Google or if you see a documentary on this, if you go to YouTube, it's a shame that I don't have that resource to show to you short clips to show how this happens in nature. But you can do this as your homework. Okay? Please do it. It's worthwhile. But let us observe that this adaptation that happens, okay, is going to promote some form of transformation. And that's something we need to pay attention. He talks about parasitic transformation. And Andre Luiz says to us, in concluding that parasitism is not a natural condition amongst animals, but rather an authentic adaptation to a certain behavior, it is fair to admit that it leads to new characteristics within the species. And he says the parasite then, during the process of adaptation, experiments impressive mutations revealed in their shape, secondary to organic subtractions and additions. This way, the disappearance of certain organs of locomotion in fixed parasites and the consequent formation of organs necessary for the stability with which they harmonize must be analyzed as an inherent phenomena of the injurious symbiosis. Okay, so he's talking about the transformation in the parasite itself. That word adaptation is very important because it's a survival mechanism. You and I were created under the law of self-preservation. Do you remember in the Spirit's book, the laws, the natural or divine laws? Third part of the Spirit's book. There is one titled Law of Preservation. So we needed to adapt to preserve ourselves. The question is, how good have you been in regard to our own preservation? Because sometimes self-sabotage mechanisms go against our preservation. Are you good at adapting yourself? How quick do you adapt yourself to new circumstances? Or you're often foreign to the new? And I say foreign symbolically speaking. Are you good at adapting to the new? Or do you always want to impose yourself in the new? Are you easy to absorb the new elements and adapt yourself or not? So these are questions we need to ask ourselves, okay? Carol Correa, hello Carol. She's asking, what does he mean by authentic adaptation? Because he's saying it's a true adaptation. That's what he means, Carol. He means it's a true adaptation. When he talks about it here, he says, it's not a natural condition in the sense in nature, that's not a natural stop, but it may occur, and it occurs because it's a true adaptation on both sides to that relationship that was created. Mhm. So it's a true adaptation, okay? It's not a natural adaptation. I'll give you an explanation about um, when a baby is born, like a pup is born, okay? There is the process of adaptation to the new, out of the womb, and then the first years of life. Compared to when a plant is being parasited and then there's adaptation on both sides, that's not natural, but it's a true adaptation. They have to adapt themselves to stay there. There's no other way. I won't say Google the pictures because it's not pleasant to see parasites, bugs in the ears of dogs or blah. It's not my thing. So I would say if you like the pathology of life in terms of studying, you can research and do it. But I would say uh, some documentaries on this can be quite doable, so we can see nature. But that's not a natural thing. But it happens. Okay? And sometimes it happens according to the transformation of the environment. Okay? Remember, we are constantly being pushed by the environment, and thus we enter relationships that not necessarily are supposed to be what they are. Okay? Thank you, Kara, for asking this important question. Now he's going to talk about the transformation that happens in the host. He says the parasite may go through mutations and may go through even the disappearance of certain parts of the body that are no longer used to harmonize with the symbiosis. The host also suffers transformation. Okay, so André Luiz is going to touch that level of adaptation by telling us, nonetheless, if the parasites can undergo significant transformations as a result of the new form of existence that they has been embraced, the consequences of these associations to the host are much more profound, because the settled offenders multiply in a menacing way, despoiling the organic province of the victim, sucking its vitality, traumatizing tissues, causing partial or complete lesions, or having toxic action, as observed in febrile infections, many times expediting its demise. What is he saying? He's talking about, what is he talking about? Well, there are several cases here, right? Several cases that he's mentioning here. But one of the cases he's saying here, for example, infections. Mhm. Infections. In infections, the parasite comes, it may be an endoparasite, takes over, and death comes. And they take our whole vitality. Mhm. Or it can go little by little, little by little, little by little, and stay there and stay there. And you see several cases of it in nature. And when we talk about people, André Luiz is going to talk about it now. It's ever more profound. And we would say, observe what he says. The host suffers great transformation. I'm going to tease you in that direction. Have you observed celebrities, Okay, and I'm gonna say this because maybe you're gonna find it in your daily acquaintances, cases of this. But look at celebrities. Sometimes they are there looking beautiful, and then as they evolve in their fame, they start changing and changing. And you say, man, they have completely transformed themselves to a level that you don't even recognize them. What is that? What do you think it is? Cases of vampirism? Mhm. Of this type of symbiosis? Yes. And at the end of the day, death. Sometimes indirect suicide, sometimes direct suicide. Cases of vampirism. Have you observed? Look at a kid. Cute, born, etc. And then goes through the teenage years and then transformation, then in adult life. And then you see that kid now as an adult completely transformed. Physically, behaviorally, emotionally, spiritually. You're like, what's going on? I'm not saying they are victims, but I'm saying we're never alone. And when we make such connections, they may really imprint themselves physically because they are intermingled in our spiritual body. So observe it, and you see these profound transformations that we see. In cases of addiction, it's clear cut. All addicted people are vampirized people. I'm going to repeat it. All, no exception. All addicted people are spiritual vampirized people, which is obsession. Period. Yes. There's no such thing as, oh, I drink a glass of wine every day and that's just not vampirism. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Social drinking is within the range. Read the book Sex and Destiny by Luiz. And it's clear cut talking about social drinking as in the category of being cases of obsession. Sexual addictions, you're being vampirized. And then you have blood pressure changes in your body. You have several physiological transformations that Andra Luiz is going to talk about because of this sucking of the vitality, changing the dynamics of the spiritual body, create traumatizing tissues, and creating true lesions in the spiritual body. Okay? That may reflect in the physical. Back to the slides. Obsession and vampirism. In a different process, but alluding to the same principle of harmful symbiosis, we find the circuits of obsession and vampirism amongst incarnates and discarnates occurring since the remote eras when the human spirit, illuminated by reason, was called upon by the divine law to renounce selfishness and cruelty, ignorance and crime. Let's see what he says. However, the vast majority of discarnate human creatures, and he uses the word creatures, I kept it, it could be human individuals, but creatures in the sense of creation by God, okay? Rebelled against the sacred calling and being free to choose their way, they started to oppress companions that were left behind, either to compete for carnal affections and wealth, or attempting revenge or delinquent acts when suffering from the liberating process of discarnation in criminal circumstances. So, okay, go back. He says here, we find obsession and vampirism since ancient times. Okay? because we are called by God to get rid of selfishness, cruelty, ignorance, and crime. But what do? We discarnate and we are after those whom we think we love, the possessions that we have. Look at the cases in the book Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec. There is a case named Francois Riquier. Francois Riquier, he discarnates and he thinks he still is incarnated. When he realizes it, he is upset because he wants his money. He says, that's my money. Why are people using my money? And he's after that. So he's going to be harassing, spiritually speaking, all the people who are supposedly using his money. Okay? And he may create forms of obsession. So Andre Luiz is giving to us why we end up in scenarios such as the ones that we're talking about. So let us observe this. When you see the beginning of this authentic adaptation in harmful symbiosis, vampirism, the host doesn't realize it. So it seems natural. Suddenly, everything takes over and you don't realize it. Life is lost. Things are lost. Pause for a second and let us go back to Andre Luiz when he reveals to us new elements in that regard. The victims of homicide and violence, manifested brutality or disguised persecution, when not in the physical vase, enter the same mental zone of their offenders, sharing with them a huge count of occult mistakes, and instead of forgiving, which would set them free from the prison of darkness, they embrace hideous vengeance, repaying every blow and evil act at the same token. Friends, this is not gonna happen elsewhere. It may happen to us. Okay? People who keep themselves just focused on this. It's true. And he talks about the fluidic infections that may occur during that manifestation. He says, many of those discarnates assail their adversaries still in the terrestrial body by boosting their imagination with monstrous mental forms, creating perturbations that can be classified as fluidic infections and will cause cerebral collapse with devastating madness, and many others immobilized in egoistic passions of this or that nature rest in profound single idea or monoideism nearby incarnates whose presence they feel unable to break away. What is he talking about here? Remember when we studied, do you remember when we studied the fluids and the spiritual body? That chapter, very important. We talked about thought particles being emitted by us, forming a stream of those that we call mental fluid, our mental stream, the mental fluid, connecting. I emit and thus I magnetically attract absorbing similar ones. So if I cultivate anger, sadness, self-pity, any other thing that is not superior, I'm going to attract like-minded minds that will come and exchange. And then I go down, 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 down. But what they exchange is tangible. Thought particles, fluidic things that become infectious. Okay? It's like true contamination. So we have to be careful. Like if you go to a bar, what is in a bar? An environment that has lots of mental bacteria. Mental bacteria. Andre Luiz talks about it in the book In the Realms of Mediumship. and in the book Liberation about mental bacteria created by intemperance, hatred, sex, addictions, etc. Addictions of all sorts. And thus, it can contaminate people. So we have to be super, 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 super careful. Okay, so let me see here. Yes, Dulce. Exactly. Simple obsession. Exactly. Raza is asking, can incarnate vampirize spiritually and not incarnate? Yes, we can. Thank you for asking. That's a beautiful question. Yes, we can. And unfortunately, it happens more than we can imagine. Okay? Cases of incarnate to incarnate obsessions. Can I give you a true example? I know several cases around the world in different countries of teenagers, young adults who become drug addicts. They don't work, they don't study, they stay in their parents' house, doing nothing, harassing the parents, threatening them, abusing them. They become the true vampires of the family. Mhm. So they are being vampirized and they are also vampirizing society and the parents. A drug dealer is a parasite of society. It's a vampire of society, spreading death to gain material things. Drug dealers are vampires. And we're not saying this in a judgmental way. We're just observing the facts according to what we're learning in the Spiritist literature. And Carol Correa is saying that the case that we're studying right now, fluidic infections, happens to the case of Nemesio in the book Sex and Destiny. Exactly. Exactly. He becomes mad, right, Carol? He becomes mad because of his own frequency in sexual addiction. He has several different affairs and he doesn't care and he thinks he's just doing it out of pleasure. And at the end of his life, he becomes truly mad, mentally ill. Okay? Thank you for mentioning this. So, look at what he says here in this very, very case. Let us go back to the slide and observe keywords here. Keywords for us. He says, uh, monstrous mental forms, fluidic infections, and passions that are egotistic, that are selfish, okay? And we only think about that. People who wake up thinking about their addictions, they go to sleep thinking about their addictions, and so on and so forth. They create mental bacteria, they exchange it, they contaminate, they are contaminated, and they spread out. So we have to be careful. So now, Andre Luiz uses an expression, spiritual ectoparasite. Ectoparasite is the one that lives outside of the body. So he says, some spirits, like the temporary ectoparasites, proceed just like mosquitoes and mites, absorbing the vital emanations of incarnates with which they harmonize here and there. These are the cases of social drinking. They go there and they suck the vitality, or when we are overeating, when we are gossiping, when we create slanders. The other day, I was meeting somebody. I I was getting together with somebody and I could feel something was off. And this person was telling me from another country, cases after cases of people, of ill things, of people, so many people. And I was listening to those cases. Two things happened after that. When I gave my ears to those lots of gossiping things. When I heard, oh, this person did this, that, that, I started having some ear pressure. It didn't turn into an ear infection, but I could feel that attempt of the contamination and that ailment overall. Later, spirits were rescued in the mediumship meeting. So lesson learned, we don't waste our time listening to ill things. Because there are fluidic infections. They happen. Thanksgiving is coming. Christmas is coming. New Year's Eve is coming. That's time for gatherings, meetings. Be careful, because sometimes we indulge into that social exchange that may not be positive. So when you see that the conversation is turning to the negative in the sense of talking new things, change, go away, remember of the spiritual fluids, remember of the fluidic infections, the spirits that come, run away, because it may cost, it may cost one whole holiday being sick physically, okay? And not to say other things. Let's go back. He talks about ectoparasites, and he talks about endoparasites, and he says many others akin of conscious and like conscious endoparasites. After testing to the vulnerable points of their victims, they secrete onto them certain products related to the chemism of the spirit, which we can call mental sympathins and agglutinins, that in a fraudulent way modify the essence of their thoughts that pour continuously from the energetic fulcrums of the thalamus in the diencephalon. So look at this picture here. As you can see in the picture, right? As you can see in the picture, and the red part is the thalamus, okay, in the diencephalon. That's the area he's talking about. But what is important here is to observe the mechanism. They are spiritual endoparasite because they enter our mental stream. They inject substances that here he's talking about. He's borrowing some medical terms, sympathins and agglutinins, because they are substances that will change our bloodstream, let's say, the chemistry per se. So he's borrowing that to say that these parasites, they go into our mental fluid, our mental stream, they inject, okay, thoughts and feelings, and we borrow it, we adopt it, and it starts creating changes in us. I'll give you an explanation. Book, Sex and Destiny. Marina, she's having an affair with two men at the same time. Of course she feels guilty. It's inside of her. Apparently nobody knows, just her. And then suddenly there is a discarnate spirit that is upset and is avenging her sister. Read the book. I won't say more. But he comes and whispers. That's exactly what Luiz is saying. Whispers in her thoughts. You are a bad person. You don't deserve any good. Look what you're doing. And that changes her. Okay? Modify, as Luiz says here, the essence of her thoughts. And she goes into a mental crisis. She ends up in the psychiatric hospital. So be careful. If you have thoughts of less self-worth, tell yourself immediately, I am a child of God. I am created to progress. I know everything passes. And then if you made a mistake, do not do what God doesn't do. Because if you punish yourself, you're trying to be more than God. Because God doesn't punish us. He educates us. Look at Saul of Tarsus. Saul of Tarsus made a huge mistake. He was not supposed to persecute Christians. He was supposed to help from the get-go. But his ego was big. He persecuted. One day, he realized he made a mistake. What did he do? Have you ever heard that Saul, later Paul the Apostle, punished himself? But how did he overcome the remorse, the guilt, etc.? By taking responsibility. So I need to take responsibility. I made a mistake. No, I'm not going to accept punishment. I'm going to accept opportunities to do better. I'm going to look at myself in the mirror and say, I did the best I could with the ignorance that I had. Now I know better and I no longer make that mistake. Move forward. Daily, I encounter people who have their shortcomings and they talk in the privacy that I'll never disclose to anybody of the consultations. And we teach them every day. Punishing yourself is not going to make yourself any better. Suffering, some people think that by suffering, you end up paying any debt. I've never heard of anybody paying any bill by crying or suffering at home. You have an invoice like, oh, you can cry all you want and you're not going to pay the bill. So I needed to stand up tall and say, you know what? I'm going to correct myself. I learned my lesson. I learned why I end up this way. So now I'm no longer going to do this. I'm going to learn my new way and open to the new. Right? Right? Elsa Rossi is here with us. I confess that this book is so scientific that it is an academic book for me, too high for my inner studies. God bless all. Thank you, Elsa. It's not that scientific. You know why, Elsa? Because Andre Luiz tells us this book is not for scientists. This book is for those who are tortured in the hearts and in the minds. So you know it. We all need to read it to value more of our lives. And I know you can do it. We can do it together. Together we can do it. We're not alone. So welcome, Elsa. Welcome to join us. Okay? So friends, here we are. Andre Luiz is telling us clear cut that we need to observe this grafting of ideas in our mental fluids. Okay? Be careful. And then physiological changes will happen. He says, this adjustment operation is established in discarnates and incarnates, committed to mutual disgrace, in true automatism, very much like animals of the absolute primitive lineage in nature. Then the executioners will commonly assume command of the hypothalamic neurons, accentuating the domination over the unmyelinated bundle that connects to the frontal cortex, controlling the sensitive stations of the coronary center that are located herein to govern the excitations. Don't go away, Vanessa, but you said it's not scientific. Well, it uses scientific terms, but why is he saying this? He's saying this. The grafting, okay, of those ideas will be felt in our spiritual body and in the physical. And where does it go? First to that hypothalamus. Remember, the hypothalamus is going to command many vital functions. That's why we may see physiological changes in us. And then it also starts controlling the discernment area, which is the prefrontal cortex. Okay? So, our crown center, the crown chakra, starts being governed by those excitations. And people start changing. Like, why are they behaving this way? What's happening today? Oh, I'm not feeling good. I'm not feeling good. Because they are being assaulted, if not vampirized already. So we have a thermometer in our physical body. We change our sleep pattern. We change the way we eat. We change our physiology in so many ways. Signs that there are foreign energies, fluids in us. Careful. We have to be very attentive. So he's talking about the whole complexity of the brain, the endocrine glands, and what they do to our vital organs, changing everything. Okay? That's why he's saying it changes our physiology. When their plan is vexed, they produce in their victims inhibition of multiple visceral functions through mechanical influence over the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems. Such maneuvers in an intricate process of vampirism consent to the regimen of fear or of a nervous war with the individuals they victimize, altering their mental screen or imposing constant losses to their somatic tissues. Observe people or in ourselves. It's about the stress system that is being affected and the relaxation system, the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic. It's the system of self-preservation. And then everything's changed. So we're seeing lots of disturbances happening around the world with people in those senses. Why? Yes, cases of symbiosis, of true vampirism. Mhm. It's so spread out that we cannot even imagine. We have to be very careful, super careful, and observant. If I'm changing my breathing pattern, my heart beating, my sleep pattern, my daily survival skills and features, it's a sign that there's something happening to us. What is going on? And you may be asking, what do I do? Oh my gosh, wait, and Luiz is going to reveal to us. And he continues here by revealing more and more to us. He says, this is what he mentions, the hypothalamus, the connections um, with our physical body controlling the vitality of ourselves. And then he says, a number of unfortunate beings, okay, a number of unfortunate beings fixated on the idea of taking justice into their own hands or given into vicious yearnings, when unbuckled from the physical vehicle because they are deceased, they subtly envelop those that are the object of their calculated attention. They use the technique of hypnosis, self-hypnosed by images of affection or reprisal, replayed deep inside infinite times. They end up in deplorable monoideistic fixation outside the notion of space and time and space, creating what we say ovoid parasites. Okay, so did you see the technique that he's using here? Hmm? You see the technique? I think this is one of the most important things ever in our lives. It's screaming out loud, shouting, saying, be careful with single ideas. What? What? Be careful with single ideas. What does that mean? It means when you are only focused on what? The negative. I remember once somebody telling me, "Oh, Vanessa, I used to wake up every day feeling hatred about somebody for a year." And I asked her, why? Because I was so jealous of what she was doing. I would wake up and I was miles away. I would wake up feeling that hatred. And later, years later, talking to the other person, she said, I confessed to her what I was feeling. And the other person said, I had an accident, I had the physical problems, etc. So it really affects people. So we have to be careful because there is what we call the technique of brainwashing. Repetition really works. So if I practice affirmations, which is always good, it's going to work. That's why we say, repeat good things to yourself. Do mirror work. Pray more often. Read more good books. But Vanessa, I do it. Read more. Study more. Do more affirmations, visualizations, and say, I believe in the good, and I believe in the good in everything and everyone. I believe in the good that prevails in the universe. Though the planet Earth is evolving at lower stages compared to higher stages, we're evolving and the good prevails. God is great. There is nothing else in this universe but the good. Everything else is just the absence. So, expansion of the good. Believe in the good. Okay? Monox, I don't know what you're talking about, Raza. What do you mean, monoxide? I don't think that word is here in my slides. Are you sure you saw it? And Rihanna is saying, we as spiritists need to bring the spiritist science teachings to heart. We need to pray to our spiritual guides to help us understand these teachings. They help us and help us help others, especially this chapter on vampirism. So thankful. You're so right. I know this is probably the first time that you're watching, that you're reading this chapter, but that's okay. It's okay. Give yourself some opportunity to read it again, listen to it again, and you absorb more and more and more. Okay, Raza, you're talking about monoideistic, exactly. Single idea. Mono, single. Ideistic, idea. So when we are single-minded, we only are fixated in one single idea, like people who feel hatred or revenge. They wake up, that's the only thing they think. And don't forget, spirits of low order, they have nothing else to do. They don't have bills to pay. They don't have any good to do. They don't take care of anybody. What do? They prank people every day. They plan traps for people every day. They plan plots against people every day. That's what they do. We have to understand that this is life. So we need to protect ourselves. But Vanessa, you said you need to believe in the good. Yes, pray for them. Because one day they will no longer be like this. Read the book Sex and Destiny by Andrea Luiz. You see the spirit, Moreira, turning into an obsessor and later into a helper. So we need to read these books to see that at the end of the day, there is ignorance, there is weakness. But the moment we allow the good spirits that are always, always willing to help, we're never alone, they come in. So do you want to be the person who opens the door to the good spirits? Hmm? To whom you want to open the door? To those who want to help everybody. So we have to be careful with single ideas. Oh my gosh, and then I only think about money and my bills and then beauty and then fame and then careful or power. Careful. Because the minute I start trading important things for these passing things, I am entrapped in the hands of the spirits. So sad, but it happens. Carol Correia saying, Moreira and Claudio truly transformed themselves in the book Sex and Destiny. Thank you. That's so true. Roz is saying, how to open the door to good spirits. You see, this chapter talks about it, Raza. Wait up, because we're almost there. Okay? But André Luiz wants to tell us more. He says, what happens to your spiritual body when you are fixated in a single idea that is not helpful? He says, they gradually bring about great transformation in the morphology of the spiritual body, the perispirit. Okay? Because our psychosomatic organs will be retracted due to the lack of function, resembling ovoids joined to their victims, who in general accept their influence in a mechanical way, in light of remorseful or repentant belated thoughts, voracious hatred, or oppressive selfishness that feed their brain via incessant mental waves. Mhm, mhm. And I'll be back on this. In these conditions, the obsessor or spiritual parasite can be compared in a way to a Succulina carcini, which, provided with perfectly differentiated organ during the life in the wild, grows roots in the tissue of host crustaceans, losing its morphologic features to become a parasitic cellular mass. Look at this. This is a crab, and this part that is circulated is the parasite that lost its um, um, parts of its retracted organs because it's a parasite. You see, it's becoming the shape of an oval. Succulina carcini is the name of it. So let us go back here. He talks about lack of function. If I don't use my potentialities, I'm going to lose it. Okay? So write it down. One of the ways to avoid vampirism is to learn the new, friends. Learn the new. Learn the good. Learn the new. Because when we are in this vampirizing relationship, the parasites lose their paraspiritual shape, turning into an ovoid. Okay? And that's when André Luiz says about morbid symbiosis. He says to us, in what pertains to the human individual, the obsessor starts to live within the personal cloud of the victim in a perfect morbid symbiosis, absorbing his psychic energy, which in many cases lasts beyond the physical death of the host, depending on the nature and extension of the commitments between the creditor and the debtor. So, truly, 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 when this happens, death may happen. Okay? And they continue in that symbiosis that is morbid in the afterlife. Cases of addiction of all sorts. I know when we talk about drug addictions, it's easy to portray. But let's talk about sex addiction. There are true cities in the darker zones where people, all that they do, sex, orgies, etc. If you like pornography, careful, because you may be under, you may be no, you are under the umbrella of this type of symbiosis. You're not alone. You need to urgently work emotionally and spiritually. Treatment, psychological, emotional, and spiritual treatment. Okay, so we have to be very, very careful. And he says to us that parasitism continues in the afterlife. In occurrences of this sort, when the decaying of the physical body is not enough to end this precious rescue, victim and executioner are even in regards to the quality of their sentiments and thoughts, finding themselves in the afterlife in a painful, infernal scenario, until the Divine Mercy, through its vigilant agents, after careful evaluation of the crimes committed, weighing, attenuating, and aggravating factors, promotes the reincarnation of the spirit, who must be, above all, worthy of such act. So that morbid symbiosis continues in the afterlife. Crimes happen, for sure, and then only a new reincarnation is going to help. What happens next? Reincarnation, he says. In executing the plan of return of the beneficiary, regressing from the spiritual plane to the terrestrial plane, the woman designated for the pregnancy in accordance to her own debts suffers the harassment of obscure forces. And I say this, that's why many women don't like their pregnancies. If people could just journal their pregnancy, they would be more aware of who is reincarnated and what I need to do to help. It's hard to say this, but it's true. You will know who that spirit is from the get-go. Because when it's somebody that is just adding beautiful energies, you feel like floating. When you feel ill, terrible, yeah, many women, they need to observe, why have I felt this way? Is it a difference between us? Or is it because I am being the vessel of the filtering of these heavy energies that come? We have to be very careful and observant of this, okay? And he says, childhood then develops. The spirit grows, learns, returns to the youth of their physical energies, nevertheless suffering the constant influence of the harasser, until a new body on earth is offered to him, frequently through marital union, where love is shaped by the trials at hand, or in difficult circumstances of destiny, so that as a child of their own blood and heart, the spirit can repay their debts, either recent or remote, in the form of renunciation. So sometimes we may be the vessel of our own obsessors, and we're supposed to love them unconditionally and open their hearts to love as well. Easy? No. But if you go read the book, The Gospel According to Spiritism, Chapter 14, Honor Your Father and Mother, Item 9, St. Augustine, in 1864, already tells us about the reality that Andre Luiz is mentioning here. Those whom we were not doing well with reincarnate in the same family to make amends. If we focus and believe that it's supposed to come around, that we're supposed to be friends, that we're supposed to love one another, we're gonna win over it. Okay? But many people give up. They give up on the love for their children. They give up on their love for their parents. And then they have to recap again in another reincarnation. Okay? Vampirism onto loved ones. In such circumstances, we'll notice a situation almost identical to what is caused by heterohexanous parasites. You know, there are parasites. They can parasite different hosts. And he's saying that human beings at the level of vampire spirits of others, they can vaporize not only one, but several others. So he says, if the adversaries of the reincarnated spirit outnumber him, many will act akin of trypanosomes, which is the endoparasite, making the children of their victims and those alike them into intermediary hosts of the deplorable thought forms that they throw, soon reaching the minds of the parents, or definitive hosts, inoculating dangerous subtle fluids through which they torment the souls, commonly until the time of their death. What is he saying here to us? It's like the mob, the mafia. They cannot harass you, they go harass your children. And then through their children, they get to you. Mhm. Look at the case of the book Action and Reaction by Luiz. The uncle starts vampirizing the very nephew and the whole family after subjugating the father, the mother, etc. So that's what we're talking about. It truly happens, it exists, and no wonder we see the dramas in many families around the world. We're not alone. But you may be asking, Vanessa, why does this happen? Well, it's simple. Look at our habits. If I watch action movies where people are constantly killed, if I allow my children to play video games like Call of Duty that are so harmful, do you expect that the angels are going to be surrounding our home? Of course not. We're not connecting with them. We're opening the doors constantly to spirits of super low order and violence. And we're going to end up in bad shape. Okay? So, moving forward, because we're almost done, where we're going to see the beautiful end of this story. Okay, I already talked about it. Now, he ends up by talking about the therapeutics for the parasitism of the soul. André Luiz says, now Raza, how to open the door to good spirits. He says here, it's important to note that all mentioned sufferings and corrigenda are conjugated to the incarnate or discarnate consciences according to the law of action and reaction, which brings about the balance or unbalance of today in relation to the deeds of yesterday. We also acknowledge that as there are therapeutic measures against parasitism in the organic world, any individual will find in the active exercise of goodness an efficacious remedy to the parasitism of the soul. Nonetheless, the word that helps and the prayer that enlightens are not sufficient. So, do the good, do the good, do the good, do the good, do the good. So André Luiz is telling us here, I have two more slides about this beautiful and most important chapter. Again, yesterday when we were talking about symbiosis, we were talking about the fact that um, we needed to pay attention to the chapter. Remember the Gospel according to Spiritism? He says here, without charity there is no salvation. Chapter 15. Okay? So it says to us, there is no solution to our problems without doing the good. But there are people who say, but Vanessa, I'm so sick. I need to be helped before I do the good. No. You have to find a way to do the good now. But I don't have time. Well, find time. Because you won't be helped if you don't help others. We need to help. We need to do the good. By first stopping, you observe that often there are people who are constantly emitting hatred, self-pity, etc. No, we need to think good of people. You cannot walk into the streets and help others, but you can do what Chico Xavier said. Do the good by emanating good thoughts towards people. If I only think the negative of people, I won't be open to the good. Okay? And Andrea Luiz is going to tell us the host. Okay? Allow me to share with you how someone, Araz is asking how someone who's obsessed and under negative influence can do the good. How? How they can do the good? By having help. You need to find help. Spiritual treatments and praying the good spirits and thinking of the good. There is always a way. If you read the books by Andrea Luiz, and I can tell you this by cases that I've seen, okay? I've seen the case of a girl who was suicidal, and one day we told her, you need to help others. How do I do it? Go find volunteer work. She did. She started feeling confident. She started feeling better about herself. And then she changed. She got out of that mindset. And now she's doing successive waves of course, she searched for psychotherapy. So we would say, in those cases, we need psychotherapy, we need psychiatry, we need spiritual treatment. And then with the help, people can go to the next level. But we cannot afford waiting for anything because it doesn't happen from the outside in. It happens from the inside out. And I would say nowadays with so much Google and YouTube, people can watch videos that talk about thinking the good, visualizing the good. So we need to interrupt the negative thoughts that are being imprinted on us. So thanks to the internet, we have more tools than we can imagine wherever we are to boost the good in us. And once we actively search for the good, we visualize it, we start exercising that good towards others. Okay? And it begins in the thoughts. I can give bread to others, but not be emitting good inside of my heart. So we're talking about the one inside of us. And then Andrea Luiz tells us, let's just wrap up here by saying the action of true goodness. He says to us, the host of disturbing influences that as consequence of his affliction in the karmic system can judge the quality and extent of his debts will depend, the host of disturbing influences will depend on his own example in the service of pure love to those alike through education and self-sublimation, because only the example is strong enough to renew and adjust. That's the case of Divaldo Franco, who kept helping so many, and then one day one of his obsessors gave up after 30 years because he saw how Divaldo, in spite of the challenges, kept on doing the good. The action of true goodness, by voluntary effort to stop our inferior feelings, constitutes a powerful factor of transformation over those who watch us, especially those immediately around us, influencing our spiritual atmosphere, for as much as our display of fraternity inspires others into edifying and friendly thoughts, which, in successive circuits or continuous oscillations of renewed energy, modifies any hostile intention of our worst enemies towards us. Okay? So, no one, says André Luiz, needs to wait for a future reincarnation for the purpose of expiation, and surrounded by pain and tears to come to peace with enemies of the past. Because, by way of devotion to our neighbor and the actual practice of humility taken to heart, it is possible to value our speech and sanctify our prayer, attracting valuable sympathy with providential interventions in our favor. Our enemies, seeing us transfigured towards goodness, also disarm themselves from evil, finally understanding that before God, only goodness will open the way for freedom and life. So, what is the homework? What is our homework today? What is our homework today? To find a way to do more good. Find a way to do more good. Because I remember recently somebody seeing somebody else so devoted to helping a homeless that she transformed her feelings towards that person, saying, wow, I felt the love that was emanated. There was a change of heart, including the incarnates. Because we will find sometimes in the Spirit Center the very people we've hurt in the past. So they look at us, they don't believe in us. They look at us and they may not really believe in the good in us. What do we need to do? Ask for nothing. Who are we? Humility, right? Only God is good. I know people who say, but they don't believe that I'm good. Well, why should they believe? Because only God is good, said Jesus. So for us, it's a push to do more. Do more. Do better. Go to higher levels. Excel at doing the good. So the homework for us today is to be careful about those single thoughts that we may be having that are negative. Do you have them? We all do. It's in the back of our minds. Huh? Sometimes they stay our whole life. It's a theme. Be careful. Change it. Resolve it under the light of immortality, because this book is about that. And two, let us push harder on doing the good, because only the good is going to shield us, preventing morbid symbiosis or vampirism, or healing us from it. Do harder, okay? Harder, work to benefit others more than you're doing. It's worthwhile pressing on regarding our altruistic feelings. Okay, friends? So this is it for today. We want to give you a big hug and we hope to see you tomorrow when we come back for more here at Cardiac Radio. Okay, here at Cardiac Radio. We hope we'll see you again tomorrow when we come back. Thank you very much, friends, and see you later.